Rules for Success podcast, rulesforsuccess.com. I'm excited today. We've got Bill Flynn from Capital Growth Advisors. Bill's been involved in the space of leadership, teaching, coaching. We just talked about that a little while ago. He's launched at least 10 startups, exited 8 startups. We'll talk about his journey. He's an author, he's a leader, he's worked with some of the notable greats. He's been in the community of EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. He's also worked with Marshall Goldsmith, the incredible Marshall Goldsmith. So I'm excited to talk to Bill today. We'll talk about his upcoming book called The Hero Trap. He's the founder of Catalyst Growth Advisors, executive advisor, speaker, and author. He's based in Boston. We talked about that a little while ago in Concord, Boston. He brings more than 30 years of operating advisory experience into the roles he's involved with. I know for our community success circles, you'd be excited to connect with Bill today because he's in our community. We challenge people to become owners and certain mindsets to become an owner. And it's a big part of that is getting out of the operator trap. It's getting out of the trap of being a technician in your business. So we'll talk about a lot of that and Bill's journey and what it takes to run and build a startup and exit a startup. Bill, how are you today?
I'm doing great. As we said, I'm a little under the weather, so I apologize for the sort of nasally thing, and I might have to blow my nose, but really excited to get together. I know we planned this months ago, so I'm glad we were able to make it happen.
Excited to have you today as well. And congratulations on the former book. Your next book, I know you've got a number in the process, but the one coming out this year, The Hero Trap, I know it's put a lot of time, energy into it. Well, talk about your journey. Like, what got you into the journey of entrepreneurship? Like, how did you figure out you wanted to be an entrepreneur and launch your first business? What was that for you?
Yeah. So as it turns out, I'll kind of go backwards. As it turns out, I love puzzles. When you talk about your zone of genius or your superhero, whatever it is, or whatever that thing is, it's puzzles for me. I've just always loved puzzles, and it goes beyond business. I have the New York Times app on my phone. I do crossword puzzles. I do the Friday and Saturday ones all the time because they're the hardest ones. I love Mensa questions. I just love puzzles, and being an entrepreneur or working in a startup is really just a big puzzle. And I think that's why I gravitate towards it. I didn't know what I want to do. I mean, I was 20 something years old. My uncle was investment banker and a VC. And, I went to him and said, look, I don't know what I want to do. I was working at Papagino's, which is a local sort of Italian chain here in the Boston area. There aren't too many left, but, when I was in my 20s, there were a whole bunch. And I knew I didn't want to do that. But it, helped me pay for school. I had a car, I had all those wonderful things. And he sat me down and just said, so what do you want to do? What do you want to be when you grow up and that kind of stuff? And he introduced me a bunch of people. And I just went to a startup, which was a networking startup before Novell, if those of you who are old enough.
I remember Novell. I got Novell certified 30 years ago.
Oh, right. Yeah, you're an engineer. So it was a company called Alloy Computer Products, and we did slave cards and put them in a bus and, allowed you to have, terminals at the end of a wire. And I just found that fascinating. And then I just kept going from there, and I did 10. I did some really cool things. I did speech recognition in the 90s. Wow. So the stuff that Siri has actually is developed by people that I know.
OCR, right? Is that what it's called? Was that what's called back then?
Optical character recognition, speech recognition. So there is some other stuff in there, but so that was Dragon Systems. I did e-commerce in 1995. So I did a lot of really cool things right at sort of the edge of that. And I just loved it. As you said, I've been through 2 IPOs, 7 acquisitions. I've generally been, your EOS folks. So I've generally been the operator. I come in and scale the thing. I'm not a founder. I've never really founded a company. I seems like I can recognize a good idea because I was actually 5 for 6 at one point.
Wow.
And to me, success is you at least doubled or tripled the value of the company. Some of them were, $1 billion valuations and all that kind of stuff, crazy in the 90s and early 2000s.
Yes.
So that's sort of what I did. And I just love doing it. And now I kind of do a different version, being a coach or business growth coach. I'm basically, as I said off air, I consider myself more of a teacher. I've studied management science for 30 years. I don't know. I may be one of the foremost experts on management science. I have no idea. And I know that most businesses don't follow management science. There's a huge gap between what science knows and what business does. And I'm trying to teach, people through my books and through my speaking and through my clients, the things that make your life a lot easier. As you said, you got stuck into that trap and were overly busy for many, many years as an engineer, as CEOs and founders find as well. And it's certainly hard. It's hard anyway, but we make it harder than it needs to be. And so that's sort of what I like to do. I like to teach people that, hey, Pareto was a genius.
Yes.
Most things you don't need to do most things in business. You just need to figure out the few things that truly matter, because they matter tremendously. And that's basically what I.
The Pareto principle. Would you summarize that? Maybe I can speak.
Yeah. The Pareto principle is commonly known as the 80-20 rule. Is that 20% of the effort produces 80% of the results. And that applies across our life, right? If you have 100 friends, you probably hang out with 20 of them more often than any. If you have a close full of closets, you have 100 pieces in your closet, you probably wear the 20 of them more often. It's just who we are as humans, right? We just like simple, and we're happy with that. We think we like choice, but we don't. It feels good, but it actually makes a mess of our brain and that kind of stuff.
Especially if you're a man, because I have like 50 shirts, but I only wear like 3. So
exactly, right? I mean, it's just the way it is, right? So when we do that in business, it actually makes a huge difference. And we've seen companies that have endured over generations, if not centuries. They do a few things really, really well. And that's sort of what I teach. I teach the meta version of that to my clients. And that's what Further Faster is about at a high level. And then the next book, The Hero Trap, is really that journey from having to be, what kind of leader do you need to be able to do those kinds of things? Because it takes a certain mindset or identity. And sort of that's where I'm starting. And I have a bunch of other books that hopefully will follow it. We'll see if they do or not. I've written them. So that's sort of my journey.
I'm excited to talk about The Hero Trap. And I also want to get your take on AI, because I also came out of college in mid-90s. That's where I came out of college and school and startups and that whole world, the internet.com bubble, which is very fascinating and fun, a lot of fun. And there's some of that happening. There's a lot of it happening again on repeat in the world of AI.
Yes.
So we'll talk about that. And I know a lot of us who are into technology, we're excited about this, and for many others are scared. We're often educating our clients on embracing AI as a thought partner, at times as an advisor partner, to get feedback, right? Feedback is very useful. To be able to recalibrate on an ongoing basis is very useful. Let's talk about the Hero Trap.
Sure.
It's coming out this year. Marshall Goldsmith wrote the foreword to it. What is the book about? What's the heart of the book about?
Yeah, it's the paradox of success. We talked a little bit. I have a tiny glimpse of what you had in terms of your experience, and my guess is you were very successful. You're probably a great student. You're probably great at engineer, etc. And all those things that we were rewarded and recognized for through our life. Once you become a leader of teams and or organizations, those things begin to work against you. Because it's not about you anymore, and you can't be the hero or the controller, as I call it in the book, all the time, because as you grow, that does not scale. And it makes your life more difficult. It creates learned helplessness within your team. So it's and as they say in AA, first thing you got to do is recognize that you have a problem if you're going to solve it. And there's a whole bunch of things that's working against us. One is obviously we've been rewarded for decades, right? And so to undo habitual rewards and training and thinking, it doesn't feel right when you say, I don't have all the answers, and even if I have the answer, I shouldn't give it, because it's my job to make those around me better, and to, in essence, fire myself from the day to day, because my job isn't to run the company anymore as the company gets bigger. It's to predict and create the future of the business, which is a completely different set of skills and thinking than doing the day to day. But we get sucked into it. It feels good, all that kind of stuff. And by the way, what's interesting, and this happened, I sort of had this experience tangentially, is when you realize that and you begin to pull away and sort of give them a responsibility and agency and guidelines and guardrails and all this stuff, they don't like it, because it's like you're abandoning them. So it's you're getting pushed and pulled from both sides. So that's sort of what the book is about. It really says, hey, recognize that this is happening. Know that it's okay. There's an identity repertoire that you have, this controller, builder, architect repertoire that you have, where controller is I do or I solve. Builder is I teach how I solve. And then architect is I design systems so that I'm not necessary in the solution.
It's kind of like being useless to the business in some sense. That's another way.
Yeah, I say your job is to be useless to the day to day, not to the business in the macro sense, but from the day to day. Your job is no longer to run that team, that division, that department. It is to help that division, department contribute optimally and flourish under you.
So how does this? You mentioned something before, also the term zone of genius. Right? So how does zone of genius connect with this identity we've built up, where we've been acknowledged for these skills that we've gotten to use and rewarded for that have become habitual? How does one recognize what their zone of genius is? And I think I know what the answer is, but like you share what that is, because we're often challenging our members to focus on their strengths, right? The things that they're good at, as it applies to scaling, while also embracing as much leverage as possible, AI, people, teams, and so forth.
Sure.
Love to hear your thoughts.
Well, the issue, Joseph, is that it's kind of invisible and it's hard to recognize. So what I tell my team is if you don't think it's happening, then let's do some practical tests. The first is just go look at your calendar and go look at all the meetings that you're in where you're necessary and you're making most of the decisions. And which ones of those don't really need to make. Along with that, I say, look, what I want you to do is look at the last 2 or 3 weeks, or even the last week, whatever it is, write down every decision you've made, just make a list. And then once you've sort of finished, you've got like 100 of them or so, I want you to look at the list and tell me which one of those you absolutely had to make. No one else could have made. And then which ones you didn't need to make. And my guess is if you got 100 on your list, there's probably 2 or 3 that you had to make, but the other 97 you didn't.
Yeah.
Now let's take some of them and teach other people how to do that. Because that makes your life easier. That actually adds velocity to the business, right? That's the whole African proverb, right? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, right? And you're creating this environment where you go together. So
was that called Ubuntu? I think perhaps maybe
Ubuntu. Yeah. I am who I am because you are. You are part of me, right? So yes, very similar to Ubuntu. Yeah. So that's sort of my take on what you have to do. It's hard. Again, it feels like caring. It feels like the right thing to do. So doing it. Actually, there's this guy I really like who I think embodies this. There's a book called Turn the Ship Around. Do you know this book, Joseph?
It sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's by David Marquette. He was a submarine commander in the U.S. Navy years and years ago. And now he's got a couple of books and he does some great speaking. And he took over the worst submarine in the Navy by mistake, basically. He was training to take over the best submarine, the Olympia, which was the flagship nuclear submarine years and years ago. But something happened, and the captain of a particular ship had to retire quickly, and he was the only one available. So he went on, and what happens in at that time, you take a year to study the ship that you're going to take over because it's a complex, especially a nuclear submarine, because you had to know everything.
Yeah.
You gave the orders, right? You stood there on the con and said, you do this, do that, all that, etc. And he now went on the ship that was nothing that he was trained on, and it was the worst performing one, and he was lost, right? He finally realized he gave an order to, I think he said I think it was like 2/3 ahead to the guy on that was sort of driving the sub, and the guy says, 2/3 ahead, aye, sir. And then nothing happens. It's like 2/3 ahead, please. And it's like, aye, sir. And he finally looks at him and says, sailor, what's the deal? He said, sir, we don't have 2/3 on this. And he's like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. And I could kill everyone, right? So he said at that moment, he decided, I'm never going to give an order again. He's going to, he obviously well-trained. He turned it to what he called intent. And he said, my team said, I intend to do this, right?
Mm.
Now he had to have him teach them, right, how he thinks. And he said, I did one order was mine, which was to launch a missile
Mm.
because that would kill other people very likely. And he didn't want that on anyone else's conscience. But he never gave another order. He said, you go on my bridge, you couldn't tell who was in charge. Now what's interesting is they were the worst performing sub in the Navy. They did an inspection 6 months later, and they passed. But a year after that, they were now the best performing sub in the Navy.
Incredible.
He spawned 10 other captains from that sub, and the Navy changed how it worked because of what he did. You know, it became less command and control and more of this sort of architect model, as I say. So that's sort of what we're going towards, right? We want to create an environment where we're from an operational standpoint, we're not really necessary.
Yeah, reminds me about Phil Jackson, I guess, with the Bulls, and he went to the next team and kind of the world of sports, and it's brilliant. It's a great metaphor. I'm really excited about checking that book.
Exactly. Yeah, great book, and he's great to listen to. You can, I play a like a 6 or 8 minute video at the beginning of every client's engagement, and it's him sort of doing a better job of saying what I just said. And I said, this is what we're going to do, just so you know. This is where we're headed. And does anyone want to get off? Because it's not going to be easy. So yeah, great book.
Incredible. Yeah, it is about intent. And so we often challenge our members to take, I guess our strategy in our community is to challenge people to play more. And part of playing more is taking more time off, taking an extra week off every 3 months, perhaps, and getting to a place where they can take 3 months a year. And I got this from Dan Sullivan many years ago. I got to work with Dan about 18 years ago. Some of the ideas around this and his time system, some of the concepts, which I know also Gino embraces in EOS. And of course, this is like this thing, like zone of genius. It's breaking out of these habits is so vital, because once we're stuck in that, like I'm an engineer, I can fix anything, and embracing leverage, like really speaking to my team at the start of the week and saying, this is our outcome, this is why we're doing this, and like really talking about the bigger vision we have, right? Impacting entrepreneurs, communities, the world, helping people break out of isolation, all those things. That's useful, and then getting my team to buy into that too. And I find even in team meetings, when we do have huddles, it's often value to restate that mission, that intent, to get everyone on the same page. Wow, yeah, that's great. What else about the book? Any other ways? Any other recommendations on people releasing that? Because I know a lot of our members in our community are so stuck in that because they're acknowledged, and we might even be failing our members too, because in our community we have daily huddles and we celebrate members, and we end the week we have victory calls, we celebrate victories, and what I'm present to and your share is that sometimes in acknowledging the victories, especially if the victories deal with habitual technical skills versus leverage, scaling, that might be something that gets in the way. You might cause somebody to build habits that necessarily prevent them from scaling. Any recommendations did you have on breaking out of that?
Yeah, sure. So 2 things. One is, I don't know if you know who Ruth Milan is. She's a relatively famous developer. And she has this wonderful quote, which I was reminded of as you were speaking, is so acknowledging the things that you said and having the intent of changing is not enough, because if the structure around you does not support that, it will not happen. And so her quote, I'm not going to do it exactly correctly, but it's really great. Is this is when the pull of the structure goes against the pull of the organization wins every time. So you can create better leaders, send them off to training and do all these things and send them to EOS. But if they go back into a system that doesn't support that, eventually they will be reabsorbed, right? The immune system will fight them. Yeah. So you have to change both. You have to change the behaviors and the knowledge and the skills, but you also have to change the environment to support that. If you don't do that, then it will likely not work. And we've seen that, right? I'm a Neuro Leadership Institute fan. I've gone to a bunch of trainings and seminars and conferences with there. I incorporate a lot of that stuff into what I do. And basically, the Neuro Leadership Institute takes science and teaches you how to create a brain-friendly company. And the woman that was running L&D for IBM was up on the stage, and she was lauding, this group of people. And he said, look, we rewrote 70% of all of our learning curriculum because we weren't teaching the right way. So we're actually making better leaders, right? They're coming out of these things better, but then we stick them back into the system and they disappear. And the numbers are supporting that, right? Is that still most businesses fail after 5 years.
Yeah.
About 50%. And then after 25, there's only like 15 to 18% of them left. So we continue to get worse. The CEO and the tenures of CEOs and those companies on S&P and Fortune 500 are shrinking. We've gone from 60 years in the 50s, 60s, and 70s to 15 in both of the indices. CEO tenures are dropping year after year. And now, recently, in the last few months, I read something where these talented young people that we're bringing up, my daughter, etc., they don't want to go into management. They don't like it. They don't appeal. It does not appeal to them. Where that was always, when I was growing up, that's what you want to be. You want to lead a team, have a title, and all that kind of stuff. They don't want it. So we're creating this environment where we're not heading to a great place. So I think we need to sort of change that a little bit. And so to your question,
is that building agency and others who are really building each person?
Agency, but again, it's what I call guidelines and guardrails, right? You need guidelines and guardrails. You need to set up in a lot of what the stuff that EOS says, these beacons, right? That say, hey, this is who we are. This is how we behave. This is how we do things here, right? So your core values, your core purpose, your core objectives, those types of things. The vision, where are we going? What does it look like when we get there? All these things you need to have in place so they know how to act, right? I'm a huge fan of commander's intent. Give them commander's intent. Commander's intent is a military thing, and a good example is if you get separated from your troop, you do three things: stay together, keep moving, search for higher ground, and then you've increased the chances that we'll find you. You don't need to be told. You don't give an order, right? So we need to give more commander's intent stuff. So when people are out on the edges and they encounter a situation that they're not familiar with, they have some underpinnings to rely on and say, oh, well, I've never done this before, but based upon what I know, I'm going to handle this customer this way.
Yeah.
And they don't ask for permission. They may say, I just want you to know, here's what I did. They may get guidance and direction if they missed a little bit. But if you give them those things, 80, 90+% of the time, they're going to make the right decision. Yeah. The problem is we don't teach that. Right? As you said before, it bubbles up to us. We make the decision. It feels good, but then we don't teach people how we think and let them do it and then create systems so they can think on their own. And they're actually will probably think better than you would because they're closer to the information and the work, especially as the company gets bigger and bigger. So that's sort of what I've found.
It's also who you hired too. So it's going through a process where you're screening people and ensuring that they have and of course, it depends on the role. You might have somebody, move a bunch of levers, and they're doing that each day, and sometimes that can be replaced with AI. But if they're looking to advance in the organization, the role they have, maybe even tap into another role as their strengths kind of shift and so forth. It's useful to qualify them in advance and ensure that they're adaptable, right? And being adaptable is a very important thing versus working at McDonald's and following a checklist and getting a certain outcome. That's useful, but in an organization, especially one that's scaling, being adaptable, would you say adaptability is a very valuable skill set?
It's adaptability is probably the key word of everything we're talking about, not only with people, but with systems and organizations, right? So what's interesting is that, so we suck at hiring, Joseph. Okay. We have 150 unconscious biases, and they enter the interview process that with the way we do it in an interview process that is not in any way orderly or formal is how we hire, right? We to bring them in, everybody talk to them, and we give the thumbs up. That is the worst way to hire. It's a 50-50 shot.
Yeah.
the stats are terrible, right? So basically, you could pick 2 good resumes and not interview them and bring them in. You have just as good a chance of them being successful as if you actually went through this whole rigorous process of weeks and whatever, and turmoil and discussion and whatever. So we are terrible at hiring. So that's a problem.
Yeah.
And the person who we're trying to hire isn't the person who's going to show up 3 months later, right?
Right.
They're putting their best foot forward. They're trying to answer the questions the way they think you want the answers, as opposed to who they really are. So I agree, we have to do a better job at hiring, and we don't. I teach my clients, I said, if you really want to hire the best, then do what I just said, which is, you know what? Go use your intuition, your experience, pick the best 2 resumes, maybe do a little bit of quick background check, hire both of them, and give them the work. That's the best possible way. Now, Google has done a hybrid of that, right? So Google, you might remember, you're driving down 101 in California, whatever, and you see the Google things, solve this equation. You could work here. They thought all this was great. And then they did the work and they found out it was terrible. So what they did is they started doing that in the interviews. They would do little work projects in the interview. They were trying to see how they would actually behave and how they would think if they were in the job. And their success rate went up tremendously after that.
Yeah.
There's a great book by Laszlo Bock, who was the head of HR, that he goes into very, very great detail on here's what we did, right? Because they've been running a science experiment for 20 something years right now, whatever it is. So there are better ways to do things. As I said, there's a saying that the future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed, right? So Google knows how to do it. Netflix knows how to do it. Amazon knows how to do it. Great companies know how to do it, but most companies don't.
Yeah. So potentially bring people together and during the interview stage, test them there and see how they collaborate, if there's collaborations involved, and they'll get a better result versus just going based on a resume or even, these days people are using AI to figure things out and research and come forward with answers. But when you see them actually engage and work, and that's part of the initial stage, that's probably a very invaluable thing to do.
Yeah, I agree. There's nothing more important than hiring the right person.
Your last book came out at the start of COVID. And of course, COVID exposed weaknesses in organizations, companies, because organizations had to now deal with remote employees, people working from home. And then eventually those employees wanted to stay at home, right?
Yeah.
In recent years, these companies have vied to bring these employees back, like Elon Musk has, right? With his organizations. How has that combined working style, working remotely, hybrid, how's that all working with this whole model of engaging teams, building teams?
Yeah, so it gets back to the premise, which is we haven't built the right structure, the right scaffolding to support things like that, right? And I would say we didn't see the problems. We found out, actually, many people don't need to come to the office. Certainly not every day, and surprisingly, they're more productive when they don't.
Yeah.
The problem is because we don't have these things in place, we don't understand the metrics and the measurements and the things that matter. We feel we need to see them. That makes us feel better, right? And actually, what's interesting is when you pull them back to see them, they are less productive. They are less happy. People are a lot happier when they can weave work into the cracks of life as opposed to the other way around, right? We weave life into the cracks of work. And that's not who we are as human beings. You're much more fulfilled. You're able to go to your kid's soccer game. You're able to go to do things that you weren't able to do before. You're able to take some breaks without sort of feeling guilty, as long as you get the work done, right? But the problem is we don't describe the work. We don't say what success is at work. We just say, work this many hours. When you work this many hours, we're saying that's good. And that's not the way we should measure.
Yeah.
Right. So I agree. And you're highlighting to me what I've found is the bigger problem. And AI is going to exacerbate this tremendously. Yes. And it probably already is, as we've seen tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people are being fired because they think that AI is going to take over what they did. And my guess is many of them are going to be wrong.
Yeah.
And they're going to say, we over-indexed on this thing because we didn't put all these things in place. So AI is going to accelerate everything. And most businesses are run poorly or inefficiently and
Yeah.
ineffectively. Guess what's going to happen when we go faster? Those things are going to happen faster.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
more businesses are going to go out of business faster. They're going to start struggling faster. And now they're going to be like, what happened? So that's sort of what I'm doing, right? I think it's a shame that really great businesses, really great ideas, and really great people fail or struggle for completely preventable reasons. If we built great businesses, AI would make them better faster. And it might expose some of our weaknesses, but if we create an adaptable environment that can make a change happen quickly, because we can't predict what's going to happen. So instead of trying to have 50 plans and then pick the plan based on what happened, let's create a very malleable and adaptable environment. So when something happens, we can adjust quickly. Right? We aren't doing that.
Yeah, got it. So it's you're bringing management science back into this, right? It's really a value. And of course, optimizing the parameters in an environment, like really setting a good environment for people to kind of thrive in and learn and build agency and collaborate and get feedback, and not focus on the strengths, but not necessarily focus on the things that, I mean, particularly for the leaders of the organization, do the things that really move the business forward, right? Move the mission forward, versus just focusing on things that might lead to immediate rewards that may not necessarily move things forward. And then you're right. I think Google has a good strategy around that, and measuring OKRs and some of those things that go into it are very useful. There are organizations doing this well. And of course, your book and the things you've done and EOS really play into that too as well, for those smaller organizations and businesses that may not be up on that level of Google.
Right. But a lot of people say, well, that's Google. And the things that you can do, anyone can do. You don't have to be this behemoth with all these resources. It's really just changing. I think this example from David Marquette is illustrative, because he said, look, as soon as I made that decision, things changed in 24 hours. He said it took months and months and months later to get the whole effect. He said, but most of the effect was created when I said, I'm no longer creating an order. Now, remember, he already had guidelines and guardrails.
Yeah.
He had a great system. He had well-trained employees, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
He had an environment that he knew and they knew well.
Yeah.
So you can't just decide. You have to have those things in place, but you don't need a ton of them in place. You need what EOS and scaling up and value builder and all these other things talk about, which is, you need a vision to say where we're going, and you need to make sure you have an identity to make sure you don't violate who you are when you're moving towards that vision in terms of growth, because growth for growth's sake is the ideology of a cancer cell.
Yes.
You have to have both.
Yeah.
But those aren't hard to put together. And then you just reinforce, right? Once you create the standards to live by, you just reinforce. Say, did we meet the standard? No. Okay, where did we miss? Okay, how we do it differently next time? And you just keep getting better. And your team doesn't need you. They need you less and less and less. And your velocity of the business will go faster and faster. And then you'll have a lot more time to think, which is what you need to do as a leader, because the future is a creation process, is innovation.
Yes.
That's thinking. You're an engineer, right? You know this, right?
Yes.
Is like, I don't know how to write the code. I have to think, what's the architecture? What am I trying to solve? What are all the modules that I need? All these kinds of things. What's going to be the experience of the user? Then you start to write your code.
Yeah.
We don't do that in business. We just start writing code.
Yeah.
And then we adjust, and then we get lost, right? And the code is spaghetti, and we're a mess, and all that kind of stuff. So that's sort of what I'm seeing.
Very well said. One of my biggest breakthroughs last year is I started taking my Tuesdays off as a play day.
Great.
And it's thinking time. It's thinking on the business. It's dreaming. It's embracing more awe, wonder, curiosity, and that's caused us to make better decisions, make better choices, and it's caused us as a business for me to trust my team, right?
Yeah.
Their agency and how they can use AI, and they're using AI quite a bit with the things they're doing, getting feedback, and there are ways to kind of clone ourselves too with AI. I'm curious about, before this started, you talked about some of your thoughts about AI in the future and the things that are happening. I'm curious how you think this will kind of play out. We talked about some of the things with technology and self-driving cars before we started recording this podcast. What do business owners need to be aware of in this new age, revolution of AI, and what do they need to be aware of that maybe their competitors are aware of, to wake up, essentially?
Yeah. So the overarching thing is what I said already, is that AI is going to be like sunlight, right? It's going to expose a lot of things much, much faster than we're going to be comfortable with, in my opinion. But it also has wonderful opportunities to help us, right? So there are certainly things that AI can do better than a human. And now we have to make sure we understand what that is. You have to put some guidelines, guardrails in place for the AI, right? So one of the big questions I'm hearing from a lot of my peers is that who's watching the AI tool, right? Because it has a mind of its own, and how do we put governors in place or things that say stop, don't do that, right? And have it go off. And we've seen these crazy stories where it blackmails the people, and and this crazy, because it's using a particular logic set which may not have been designed correctly yet. So you have to have that in place and do that. And so for me, I did my own website. I'm kind of a geeky. I'm not certainly at your level, but I was an engineer once. I wrote in, my first language was Pascal.
Yeah, mine too.
If you remember that, right?
Yeah, that's my first language in school too.
Yeah, right. So, and I didn't have a screen. I was on a VT100 from DEC, and there was no screen, right? So you had to write the code and then hit a button and then wait to see what happened. It was terrible. That's why I'm not doing it probably. But so I did my website. I did WordPress, and it was okay. It was fine. My website doesn't really do much other than it's more of a resource than anything. But I'm trying to be a thought leader. I'm trying to have a different impression of who I am. So I said, I really need to update this and make it look better, look more professional. So I just downloaded the native Claude app.
Yeah.
And in 3 hours, I had a brand new website.
Wow.
No, I had to tweak it and fix it, over time. But I mean, 80% and 90% of it worked really well with just sort of this interaction with Claude. And I wasn't doing anything technical. I was saying, this is what I want. And, and I said, here are 3 or 4 websites that I really like. Can you make it kind of look like that? And here's my old website. And can you incorporate, I want most of this content there, et cetera. It was tremendous. So things like that, should be done by an AI tool. But to me, the best use of an AI tool, especially for a leader, is a thought partner. Right? I wrote these books, and they're based on management science. And management science greats are Deming, Drucker, Schein, McGregor, Bennis, Edmondson, Porter. So when I wrote the first book, I said, okay, I want you to act like you're these thinkers. And I want you to critique my book. What's missing? Wow. What's too complicated? I mean, I could never have done that before. And I said, Drucker thinks this way and Deming thinks that way, and Schein would say this here, and you should change, whatever. And so I took the things that I liked and it made sense to me. And I think I made the book better. Right, because rigor is important to me. So doing that, right, and saying, just like, here's our strategy. I want you to be a competitor and try to beat me. Yeah, right? Yeah. Just things like that. Where am I weak? All those kinds of things. That is a wonderful. So there's automation and augmentation. Yeah. So we're right now in the middle of automation. Yeah. We think, and I think again, we're gonna, just like we made a mistake with not doing the things we needed, and then COVID forced us to do it. And now we're going back to the way we were. Again, we're blaming something else because we haven't built a really good company and a really good structure. So we're now saying, oh, let's close in on ourselves, get everyone here and make sure that we're, they're doing the work, and we're get the whip out and all that kind of stuff. And we've seen that doesn't work, but it feels comfortable. It feels right. And the other one feels scary. So we don't want to do scary. Our brain doesn't like scary. Yeah. So I just think it's going to be a wonderful thing when we use it correctly. There's this great book called Leaders Make Our Future, which talks about AI as that, and we talked about the augmentation, what we're going to be able to do in the future. We're going to be able to do things that we never thought were possible, because we're leveraging. It's like bringing the 100 best thinkers into the room with you. Yes. And saying, help me, right? Here's what I want. Here's my vision. Here's here's the thing I want to make better in the world. Yeah. How am I doing? What am I missing? You never could have done that before. You got Vistage and EO and YPO, and those are all wonderful things. But to be honest with you, most of those people don't know what they're doing either. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I think that's an issue that
Mm.
we're going to have to face. It's going to be rough and tumble. We're going to be I think we're approaching the messy middle right now. I hope we come out on the other side really well, because I think it can only be a wonderful thing if we use it correctly and use it in the right environment correctly.
I love how you talked about how you're using AI as thinking partner, all those different hats, um, critiquing the work you're doing, critiquing ideas and things of that sort. So much value. And then we talk about we do a challenge called 3-Day AI, and day one's all about leveraging AI as an advisor, actually talking to it, building a relationship, and getting feedback back. It's very useful.
Yeah.
It's not often the most perfect feedback, but if you train it well enough to establish guardrails or have it think like Deming and others, then it could be very useful of sorts. I'm curious. So you mentioned, some of those organizations, Vista, CEO Focus. For a CEO, what's the value of talking to a peer? Like, what role? How can a CEO get challenged more effectively? Of course, AI can challenge us to some extent, right? When we're talking to AI, especially when I talk to Grok, for example, it challenges me. Sometimes it curses me out because it's, the less guard. It's fascinating how these LLMs work. But when it comes to trusted peers, like engaging with other CEOs, what's the value in that, and how do people leverage those peer-to-peer relationships more effectively? My whole business is based on that idea, and now we're also embracing more AI too in the midst of that. But the human connection is, I find, very valuable. I had somebody on my podcast last week who even shared with me the nature of when we connect with another human being, another leader, executive playing at a similar level. There's often some aspect of emotional balance that occurs because we're able to be heard and speak things out loud and communicate our challenges. And in verbalizing our challenges, sometimes it becomes, even for ourselves, by speaking it out loud, especially when someone has a high expectation of who we are in our community, we play off this idea that we rise to the expectations of our peer group. How do you envision peers playing a role with like CEOs playing a role peer to peer versus just talking to AI, the way you have it for your book and other resources?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I was a Vista speaker for a number of years, and so I think those in organizations and environments are wonderful for emotional support.
Yeah,
it's kind of like, I can't talk to anyone else, right? I can't talk to my board because I don't want to seem like I don't know what I'm doing. I can't talk to my team because I don't want to seem like, I don't want them to lose confidence in me. So you have this strip of people that you can connect with and just feel safe and say, man, this job is freaking hard. And, and I'm waking up in a cold sweat and I don't know what, I got this thing going on. I don't know what to do. Just as you said, just being able to let that out and sometimes hear yourself speak, right? So I think that's the best part of it. What I will tell you, which I think is dangerous, and I apologize if I'm
no, please.
We're
We're constantly optimizing, improving where things are now. We used to have a subset of values on our website: integrity, authenticity, connection, like all these things, and we simplified things in past 3 years to make the day better, make each other better. We just simplify things, and just the whole idea of being a little better each day, and that's been extraordinary. So we're always optimizing everything we do. We used to engage people who had done Tony Robbins work, and we found that a lot of the best people who join our community now happen to have done EOS. They're really on that path. So we're always optimizing. So sometimes these podcasts, I learn something new, and the basis for everything we do is we model one another. I get to model you, get to model me, perhaps in some aspects, and there's a lot of value with that. So please.
Sure. So I describe myself, I'm a scientist, right? I believe in the scientific method. I believe that your job isn't to prove that you're right, it's to prove that you're wrong. And if you can't, then you're onto something. And so I probably spoken to 700 to 1,000 CEOs in those 3 or 4 years that I was a Vista speaker. And I did the same deal, right? I did the same spiel. I asked the same questions. It was a workshop kind of model. And I would ask very basic questions. And the two things that really stuck out for me in the questions that I asked is I would always start every meeting out with, what is the biggest barrier to success in your company today, and did the sticky thing, and they'd write it on the sticky and put it up on the wall, and most of them were operational issues. And so, and I put them on like the wheel of the wheel of the scaling up, people, strategy, execution, cash wheel, and they all stuck down in the execution area, mostly, some in the people, but as it turns out, it was mostly execution. And then I would say, okay, great, what are you executing on? And then I would just wait. And it was and it was silence. And these are people, some of these Vistage guys were running hundreds of millions of dollars size businesses, around for decades, if not centuries. And they didn't really have the answer. They didn't know. So I said, so in my world, what you're executing on is your strategy. And then I'd say, okay, if your 12-year-old nephew or niece came to you and said, I just learned this word strategy, what does it mean? And how would you define it to them? And I had everyone go around the room, and I'd have them write it down and then read it out. And I'd be with 12, 15 CEOs, and they all had different definitions of strategy, not their strategy, just strategy, right? It's the roadmap. It's the plan. I'm like, it is not either of those things. It is the thinking that goes into the formation of those things.
Yeah. Wow.
Right. And so my point is, most of your peers don't really know what they're doing, but they have what's called the illusion of knowledge. Right. If you ask someone, what is your confidence level that you know how a toilet works? And on 1 to 10, they're going to be, 7, 8. I've gone to the bathroom a lot. I really understand, right? I've done it most of my life, right? Several times a day. And then you say, okay, could you walk me through how it actually works? They can't, right? They don't know. They don't understand the vacuum. They don't understand how how the plunger works and how, the suction works, like you do sucking gas out of a gas tank they don't know how that works.
It's a great example. By the way, I have a degree in chemical engineering, and my wife, when we were dating, she asked me what I did. I said, I'm a plumber.
Right. You are. Yeah. Well,
in some ways, as the humor, she's an endocrinologist, so she controls my raging hormones. So we play off each other.
Very nice. So to me, that's the fears, because we confuse confidence with competence. And I'll tell you, I've been in a lot of these meetings. These are confident men and women.
Yeah.
And they say things as if it's true. And most of the time, unfortunately, they're wrong. And so bad data added to bad data doesn't make good data.
Right.
So that's the thing I would always be, I would say, be warned against. But what's great, what you say is, you now have this tool. You have access to the world's information and the experts, right? Don't ask it, what's a great strategy? Say, how would Michael Porter say is a great strategy? Or someone who actually knows what strategy, because most people do strategy wrong, right? So you have to make sure you're not asking the general public. You want to find the experts, the people who have experience and have proven that they can do it well.
Yeah.
That's who you want to ask the question to. And that's not the people at your EO, Vistage, and YPO. They just don't have that experience, but you have access to it. If you ask the right questions, then I think that will make those meetings better and better and better. Right?
Incredible. I love that. Yeah. I love the integration of all of that, and leveraging AI as a colleague advisor, right, which big fans of, and testing everything we put out, every bit of feedback we get, test it out loud and leverage AI. Will this work given what we're out to create? And I agree. You all mentioned earlier too, a big part of what we do is having a vision, like being clear what the vision is and being able to communicate that vision, and maybe in a way that moves ourselves and moves others around us, because there's an opportunity to recalibrate to that vision, to that why, on a regular basis if we choose to. But it's really having that vision of what's possible in 3, 6, 9 months to a year.
Yep.
Really extraordinary. Really great. Any I'm curious for yourself, what are some and we'll close out the last couple of questions. I'm really enjoying this conversation, by the way. This is extraordinary. A lot of takeaways for our members.
Thank you.
What are some rituals you take on each day to engage in your day, right? Because you're a teacher, you're an educator, you've mentioned before that in many of these organizations you've come on board, improved operations systems. You've had eight exits so far. What are some things you do each day to stay engaged in your day, to really own your day?
Yeah. So I'm a self-proclaimed iconoclast. So I don't answer this question like everyone else does. I don't plan, Joseph. I've never planned. And I didn't do it I didn't have a plan to not plan. It just wasn't something that made sense to me. And it's funny, now that I'm in my 60s, I've reflected back on, I mean, I've done pretty well, right? I've had I'm 5 for 10 in startups. I was the number 1 and number 2 salesperson everywhere I went. I'm, in 100 coaches with Marshall Goldsmith and Dory Clark and, and Ken Blanchard and, all of these greats that I've admired for years. And I'm hanging out with them, right? So I feel pretty good about sort of my track. I'm not famous or popular or whatever, but I think I'm pretty good at what I do. So my 2 things are, I think you need to focus on energy and time. Right? You want to do things that give you energy. That when you're doing them, you feel fulfilled. You feel excited. And that's sort of what I always gravitated towards is that I'm like, oh, this feels good. I really like this. And I just did that. And then, I did that. It was over. We sold the company or whatever. And then, luckily I got connected to a bunch of people and we did the next one and the next one, the next one. Yeah. So energy is really, really important.
And teaching, I imagine teaching for you gives you energy.
I love it. Yeah. I love when someone's like, oh, right. I never thought of it. That would be so much easier if I did it that way. And, I was funny. I was with a client the other day and we were doing just writing simple things, right? EOS. We were writing priorities. And this guy I really admire. He's terrific. He's well read. He's extremely bright. He's very good at what he does. And he was in charge of 2 of the company priorities. And he wrote them out. And I said, John, I don't know what you're saying. You're using jargon like icebox and whatever. I said, you need to write it for people who aren't in the room. Yeah. In such a way that they understand it without you needing to interpret for them. So we worked on it. And at the end, we did an appreciation. He said, I just want to appreciate, pushing me, right? I appreciate Bill pushing me to remember that I'm not writing this for me. I'm writing this for someone else, right? So yes, that gives me energy. So energy is one, time is the other. When you're doing something and you're doing it for an hour and it feels like 5 minutes, remember that. Right? It may not be the thing that you're doing, but there's something related to that thing that you're doing. And we talked about it earlier. Mine is puzzles. I can just sit down and an hour is gone and I'm still on the puzzle, right? And I'm like, I got to go eat or whatever, because I'm just so absorbed. Yeah. If you can really focus on energy and time, not only for yourself, but for your team, right? Understanding.
Especially if those things are conducive toward moving things forward, creating a more
exactly.
impact.
So you got to balance them and the company
versus playing video games, things of that sort. So actually making choices.
Right.
Yeah.
Contribution is a big word for me, right? You have to contribute to that vision, to that success. You have to marry the 2. And when you do that, people are engaged. They're excited to come to work. Their Sunday doesn't suck for them. It sucks because they can't wait to get to work until Monday. They're like, I can't wait to get up and go do it again. Right? That's what you want. We don't have that. We have an engagement level of 21% right now. Yeah. It's horrible. Most people don't want to go to work.
Most heart attacks happen on a Monday morning, right? So
exactly.
If you give, and my mom had a heart transplant. My dad had a stroke. So in that world, my dad had a stroke on a Monday morning. But if you give somebody a reason, a driver toward being part of something, right, that they're involved with, and focus on play, their zone of genius, extraordinary things can happen, will happen, especially if they're looking forward to the opportunity, being responsible, stepping into a role and adding value and contributing and building something extraordinary and unique.
Yeah. So most of your listeners might know this. So since you like practical, so what I would say to leaders of teams is do this exercise. It's called love, loathe, long, lust. Do it for yourself first, and just go through your day, through your week. And when you love something, when that energy is there, right, and time flies, write that down. When the opposite happens, put that in the loathe section. I loathe this, right? I put it off. I procrastinate. 5 minutes feels like an hour. Write that down. Don't worry about the middle, right? If neither of those extremes happen, don't worry about that. But let's just start with the edges. And then do long and lust, right? What do I long to do that I have used to do but no longer do anymore? Write that down. And what do I lust after? Like what's something that I see others doing or I'm talking to peers that I think I would really enjoy that. And create that list and try to, incorporate that into your life and the life of your team members for the love, the long, and the lust. And then how do we eliminate or delegate or automate or something, anything and everything on the load list? And what's interesting in your team, and you might have found this yourself, is some people that one person loathes, someone else loves.
Yes. Yeah.
So guess what? As long as you understand the contribution that team makes to the organization, who cares who does what?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? Let them do the things they love to do.
Yes.
As long as it's contributing to your
great exercise. I'm gonna.
Yeah. So I would. That's one thing I would do practically. For someone to take away from here is do that maybe twice a year, 3 times a year, and just keep it up and just keep working towards it. You'll eventually find that you're adding velocity and engagement and fulfillment to your team.
Amazing. It's a great exercise. I'm going to challenge our members to take. This is one of our longest interviews so far. And it's been that way because I've gotten tremendous value, and our members will get tremendous value out of it, especially that 4L exercise. It's a value. We often challenge our members to take more time off, like play more, and that's useful too, especially if they come back and are able to think more critically and make choices.
Can I add one thing? Because this is the vacation test. So do the vacation test, but don't check in. Right, take one of the vacations, maybe a week or whatever. And by the way, you can do that in smaller chunks. You can do it for a day, or you can just do it for a meeting, right? And say, I'm not making any decisions in this meeting. Whatever size you want to apply, but take a vacation and then see what broke. And whatever broke, figure out why and what you can do differently so your presence isn't necessary for that moving forward. You might also find things got better. And then great, right? But you really want to find out what broke. So the vacation test is a huge thing for me. And again, you can take a vacation in a meeting, you can take a vacation for a week or a day or whatever. Just figure out what it is. You'll find that lots of things are broken when you're not there. And you don't want that, right? You want them to thrive when you're not there.
Incredible. Thank you, Bill. Incredible episode today. For our audience, check out this whole podcast, the mind map summarizing all aspects of it at rulesforsuccess.com. It's available on Spotify, on YouTube, Vimeo, all major channels it'll be on. Check out Bill's latest book, The Hero Trap. It'll be available later this year, 2026. It'll be available later this year. And you can find Bill at catalystgrowthadvisors.com. This has been a privilege being able to connect with Bill this way, and so many nuggets came out of this. I really appreciate the conversation today, Bill.
Glad to be here. And you can pre-order the book on Amazon right now if you'd like.
Pre-order right now. We'll make it happen. I'm going to order it. I'm saying that right now. I'm going to order that book because
cool. Thank you very much.
Provide so much value in this so far. Once again, rulesforsuccess.com. Tap into this. And if you're listening to the podcast, please like our podcast too on whatever channel you're on. It does make a difference in us growing and scaling and becoming better.